All right, so if you want to open up to Exodus 20, that's going to be where we get to commandment number 10. I told you last week, but just in case you're happening to be wondering this, the plan is today we will do the 10th command, which is this one. Today is the 10th command. And then next week, what we'll do is we'll spend a class. That's our last class. And I didn't know where else to fit this in any of the other commands. But the last class will fall into, I don't like to call it social justice, but that's kind of the word that it falls under in our society. And that is, there are a lot of laws in the Old Testament that specifically protect weak and vulnerable populations. And so I want to at least spend a class talking about those different things and what that looks like. So that's our course. We're at the end. I think if I'm right about this, I've got 2 classes left now and that class. So today I think you should have had some time to get to Exodus 20. I should have told you to also go to Deuteronomy 5 and mark them, because there is one difference. On most of these commands, Exodus 20 and Deuteronomy 5 are pretty much lined up. If there's a word difference, it's not significant, but there is one here that I think is worth paying attention to. So Exodus 20 and verse 17, you shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male servant, or his female servant, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's. That last part is really... So he basically says, don't covet this, don't covet this, don't covet this, don't covet anything. It's the way that he finishes that. Now, in Deuteronomy 5, I think it's worth marking this in your Bible, just so that you can see it and remember it the next time that you come to it. Deuteronomy 5 says, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife. And then it says this in the second one, you shall not desire your neighbor's house. There's a different word that's used there. Don't covet, don't covet, don't covet, don't covet. Deuteronomy 5, don't desire. And then it goes on, don't desire his house, his field, his male servant, female servant, ox, donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do in this class is define some terms here. What does it mean to covet? Yeah, Ian?
It means if, like, just pretend, if I had a 911 Ferrari, and, like, say my neighbor came over and was like, oh, dude, that's so cool, I want that. And then I go to work, and somebody steals that, they really want it so bad where they will wind up, like, stealing it. That, to me, that's one of the commandments, thou shalt not steal.
Yeah.
But also, you shouldn't, you have money. Why not you buy it on your own instead of stealing mine or whatever?
Yeah. I think that that's great what you've said, because I'll hold off on 1 second before I get here, but that's going to be the bulk of our class today, is what you talk about. There is the coveting that happens, but the bulk of this class, I want to move through the rest of the 10 Commandments and say, oftentimes the coveting is the seed that leads to the other problems. So yours is, hey, I like that Ferrari. The seed that leads to, I'm going to steal it, right? So that's where we're headed in this class. What else you got for me? A definition of coveting or elements.
This might be more of like the effect, but I think of scheming. It's not like to see something that belongs to someone else and say, like, oh, that's really cool. Like, what a neat thing. I think about that in our barbecue group chat all the time. Like, oh, what a really cool smoker. Like, what a great meal that you made. But I'm not like actively planning on taking that from you or thinking that
Yeah. Yeah. So it goes farther than the liking. I think this might be where okay, so maybe we can use the word from Deuteronomy 5 here, the desire. Like there's a difference between liking something and desiring it. Maybe that will help us.
I think the mindset is very different. You start to go down a dark path with the coveting. Like, it's not just, oh, that's cool. Like, like they've said, it's, why do they have that? Why didn't I get that? Why didn't I, it focuses, instead of being happy for someone else, it's focusing on your lack of something and how do I achieve that? Or you get into a mindset of not liking that person because of some object that they might have worked hard for and gotten. All the things that can go with that.
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes you can covet something so bad it becomes an idol to you.
Mm.
And maybe you even change your relationship with God in a way to help you acquire the thing that you covet. So like maybe you don't put money in the plate this week because you want to save the $50 for this thing that you're obsessing over every time. And then it might even, if it's something that's your neighbor's, maybe you change your relationship with them because you want to acquire the thing that they have so much that it just takes you away from where you're supposed to be in the path that you're supposed to be on.
Yeah. I like that. I like that. I like the pictures that you painted to go along with it. There's the thing in your heart, but then there's the pictures. Did I see? Yeah, Rob?
A couple things. I think there's I think there's a yearning that goes with coveting. Yearning. It's something that I'm yearning for. And I think my comment on that would be that I think it is possible to be covetous without ever really intending to act on that covetousness. If I'm yearning for something, I'm yearning for my neighbor's smoker, that's wrong in itself without developing schemes or plans to actually take it. I think just yearning. It's okay to acknowledge that, hey, that's a nice smoker, but now I'm taking it. You said a step further. I think that's good. I'm taking it a step further, and I'm thinking about it all the time. I'm yearning for it, and my other comment would be to not lose sight of the fact that in the New Testament, I hate saying this without having to look at where it is. I think I remember that to covet is used in a positive sense once. I think it's something about Paul earnestly coveting somebody's companionship or to be there or something like that. Again, he yearns to be with someone else. When I get done talking,
I think you really put you make a good point with the coveting the prayers thing by modifying it with the word earnestly.
Yes.
Like that's what really makes coveting. Coveting is it's not like, hey, pray for me, but I really need you to pray for me. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like that's what turns the volume up. Let's do one more and then push forward just a little bit. Caleb?
I don't want to cheat based off the...
No, please take us forward. Yeah.
I think there's a component of ungratefulness of your current situation. Good point. That comes with coveting.
Yeah. So look at this. Luke chapter 12, starting in verse 13. Now, look at how I have this on the board. Luke 12, 13 to 21, and then I've got and following. So the 13 through 21 is the section that's for this. But if you're taking notes and you want to do more study on this subject, keep on going. Don't stop here because there's a lot going on in this text. But this is what it looks like in verse 13. I'll tell you why I'm here in just a second. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Now you see, this example is a good example of the coveting because the battle over stuff has created family problems. Do you see what's going on here? It's like, hey man, can I borrow your chainsaw? Tell him to give me the chainsaw. You know what I'm saying? Like the volume has gone up, and that puts us into this territory of coveting here. So family problems. And since we're talking about it, if you want to think about this as you read through, I don't need any examples, but how many of us have watched whenever somebody dies and then there's some family squabble over dividing the stuff? I mean, that's gross. That's...
One thing, it might relate back to what you were going over earlier, and this might be a Captain Obvious statement, but what's happened is there's more than one person involved. So there's you making the decision, and then, so for instance, I could say, oh man, the Bilbies got to go to Australia. That's what I want. How come he got to? So now I'm dragging Chad into my feelings about something when he had nothing to do with it. So if I go up to him and say that, I'm thrilled for them. I'm so excited that they got to do that. But if I didn't have that reaction and I said something, now he's involved. I've drug other people into my maliciousness.
Were you really in Australia? Was I? So I was texting you in the middle of the night. Was I waking you up when I was texting you all those times? I didn't. I didn't realize. I would have scheduled them for another time. Chad kept answering me, and I was like, now that I was thinking about it, it's like, that was the middle of the night for you. Sorry about that. Okay, 14. But he said to him, man, who made me a judge or an arbitrator over you? And he said to them, take care and be on your guard against all covetousness. In this conversation of, tell my brother to give me my stuff. And Jesus' lesson is, hey, this is where we need to talk about this. Be on guard against all covetousness. And then he explains it. Why? For one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. And he told them a parable saying, and so this parable was to illustrate the possession fact. The land of a rich man produced plentiful, and he thought to himself, and then red is bad for me, so I've redded all of the personal pronouns, because that's the point. What shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops. And he said, I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods, and I will say to my soul, it's all about me. Everything in this story is all about me. It's my stuff. It's what I'm going to do. It's what I'm going to get. This is what he's going to say. Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry. And God said to him, fool, this night your soul is required of you. I should emphasize that. Your soul is required of you. And the things that you have prepared, whose will they be? Like you walk down this road of problems with your family over stuff. For what? And then so if you move on into the next chunk of text in verse 22, the main thing is don't be anxious about your life. And this is where Jesus is going to talk more about stuff. It's not about stuff. So I'll give you a couple definitions here. Dictionary Biblical Literature. What is coveting? Lust. I underline that definition because lust, you could say coveting another person's things, but if you say lusting for another person's things, that really brings it to life. And desire is one of the definitions. And then it's i.e., here's an example, strongly desiring another person's possessions. Here's another one, another definition. In a bad sense of, this word was helpful for me to get this sense. When I talk about turning up the volume, the definition says inordinate, ungoverned, selfish desire. So it's a selfish desire. I want this stuff, but it is inordinate and ungoverned, like out of control desire, selfish desire. It's all about me. And then also lustful desire is listed in this definition. So anything else that you want to say about coveting in general, what is it? What does it look like? Any other passages that you might think of that would help us to understand? And as you're thinking about that, here's another thing that I want us to really focus on this one. I'm just obsessed with this. I'm fascinated with this. How could any earthly government have a law like this? Like, how could I have a law that says, Corbin, no coveting, and if you do, you've broken the law? How could that be a law? Because how could I enforce that law? Like, how could I can say don't murder somebody because that's an objective thing that you've done, and I can say don't cheat on your wife because that's an objective thing, but how? I just think that it's amazing that God legislates even our heart. Don't even do this in your heart as far as desire is concerned. I don't know. I'll stop here for a second. Intro thoughts on coveting.
In my mind, it kind of blurs the line between temptation. You know, like it's not sinful to be tempted. Even Jesus was tempted, but coveting is almost like being tempted, but it's the sinful wanting, and you cross the line.
Yeah.
It affects you. You're not just being tempted anymore.
Let's do this with that comment. James 1 in verse 14. This is exactly where I want to go with this. I love the quote from Martin Luther about I can't prevent the birds from flying over my head, but I can keep them from building a nest in my hair. Like temptations are going to hit me. But then it's up to me what I do with that temptation. Am I going to make some room for it and give it a home in my heart? Or am I going to say, get out of here, you don't belong in my life? So somebody, would you read James 1, 14 and 15, please?
But each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. Then desire, when it is conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death.
Okay, so there it is. There's a difference between being tempted, but then being tempted is like being pregnant, and it grows and it grows and it grows, and then that desire in verse 15, that desire conceives, and the things that it gives birth to are death. And the idea is no, you can't give it a place in your heart. So the thing that I want us to think about for the next, maybe the bulk of this class, let's do this. I'm going to shoot to have this conversation until we get to the 7. So 15 more minutes. Coveting is the seed that sprouts and grows into all other sins. And you can do whatever you want. You can talk about whatever you want on this. But what I would like to do is I would just like to move through the 10 commandments that we've been talking about this quarter and talk about how each one of these, I don't like to call it laws, because the whole point of this class has been, it's not just a law, it's not just a rule, it's a reflection of the character and nature of God. Each one of these things is a violation against his nature and his character. But I think, I spent some time just working through it, I think you can root all of those sins, that all of those sins starts with coveting. So can you think of a way, I mean, let's just start with the one that we talked about last week or 2 weeks ago, stealing. Okay, that one's not difficult, right? I don't just wake up one day and decide to steal something. No, I want that thing and I can't have it, but it's going to be mine, so I steal it. That's kind of what it starts with coveting, it ends in stealing. I think another very obvious one would be adultery. You don't just wake up one day and decide, hey, I'm going to do adultery today. No, it starts with coveting. I want that thing. In fact, that's part of coveting. Don't covet your neighbor's wife. It starts with desiring and wanting, and then it grows into eventually adultery. So what if we start with, I am the Lord your God? Can you think of a way that coveting might be the root of violating that commandment.
Gets into that desire to be a God ourselves and putting ourselves before everything and anything instead of putting ourselves in the right relationship with God.
Yeah. Let's go to Genesis 3. That thing that you just said, Kevin, that thing is exactly spelled out in the scripture. Our desire to put us in the place of God. And I might even do more than that. Like, my desire to put me in the place of God, but my desire to have more for myself than what I am entitled to. So Genesis 3 in verses 5 and 6, the snake says, God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be open and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. Allie, look at this. You can be like God. And you're like, ooh, hey, I can be like God. All right, you know. The desire to be that. Wow. And then you get to thinking about it for a little bit. I can be like God. Verse 6, so when the woman saw that the tree, three things, is good for food, hey, I think I might like that. Check that out. It's good for food. It was a delight to the eyes. Hey, these words are the coveting, I think, that we're seeing here. Good for food, a delight to the eyes. The tree was to be desired to make one wise. I can be like God. What I would like for us to appreciate about those words, though, is those words are describing this coveting that we're talking about right now. Ooh, hey, look, I think I might like that. And in coveting, now Adam and Eve, that coveting gave birth to them violating the first command. I am the Lord your God. Do you see what I'm talking about? It started in the heart and it grew into the worst thing you can do. What do you want to say about that? Anything else? We don't have time for me to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. Look at Isaiah 14. Every time I come to Isaiah 14, I have to say this. So Isaiah 14 is specifically a reference to Babylon and the king of Babylon and the fall of Babylon. But there are a couple places in the Old Testament where you read through the description and you kind of think to yourself, is there something more than Babylon going on here? And I think yes. I think the answer is yes. I think we're talking about the king of Babylon, but this is one of those passages that people use to describe Satan and his fall. And I think that's right. I think you can do that, but you need to know both. It's about Babylon, but there's probably something under the water. But if you think about the destruction, the fall of Satan, look at how the fall of Satan happened. If this is really a reference to him, starting in verse 12. How you have fallen from heaven, O day star. The Latin word for day star there is Lucifer. I think it's a reference to Venus. I'm not sure. But that's why Lucifer gets attached to Satan, because of that word right there. How you have fallen from heaven, O day star, son of dawn. How you are cut down to the ground, who laid the nations low. Listen, you said in your heart, this is how it started. I will ascend to heaven above the stars. I will set my throne on high. I will sit on the mount of assembly in the far reaches of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. So if that really is a description of Satan, or at least points to Satan himself, even Satan's fall started with coveting in his heart, is the point. Anything you want to say about the violation of the first commandment? How would coveting relate to the second commandment? Specifically, what I'm thinking of is no idols. You can attach it to no other gods if you want. No other gods and no idols. Yeah. Dustin, you made it, the thing that you said, your comment made me think about this conversation right now. I want that thing, and I'm not getting it from God, so where can I go to get it? Right? And and in the Old Testament, the picture is, where do you go to get it? And listen, maybe it's a big deal, like rain for your crops so that you can survive. Where am I going to get that? God's not giving me what I want, so I'm going to turn to Baal. And maybe Baal will give me what I want. But it's rooted. That's the seed in the heart. The reason why I'm so obsessed with talking about this is because this is the 10th command. And I wonder if it's the 10th command, not because it's the least important, but because we get to the bottom and God says, and this is where all the other things begin. Yeah.
Another way it could be coveting is like if you just want to be like everyone else. Like Israel was always the weirdos because they only served one God, and maybe you just want to be like all the other people and serve multiple gods, so you're not weird.
Yeah. To not be the outcast. Okay, third command. Taking the Lord's name in vain. How would coveting be the root of that? Or could be. How could coveting be the seed that grows into that? And what about if I give you a reminder of our conversation there? When we talked about taking the Lord's name in vain, specifically we talked about making a false oath in the name of God. I promise this in the name of God, and it's like it's empty. I'm not really interested in doing that thing. Does that help you think about where coveting might be the seed of that sin? What about in Acts chapter 5, where Ananias and Sapphira gave only a part of what they sold, and the people came to them and said, hey, did you do all of this? And they swore an oath and said, I've given everything. And they hadn't. And I don't think that the problem is necessarily that they hadn't. It's that their deceit in their heart, and they're swearing this oath about, no, I've done this thing. And it's like their desire in that story, their desire to keep back some stuff for themselves was connected with them swearing this false oath. Do you see what I'm talking about? It starts in the heart. That's the thing that I'm trying to point to. What about the Sabbath? Don't break the Sabbath. This one is pretty easy in my mind.
I work more, I can get more.
Nehemiah 13. That's exactly what was happening in Nehemiah. You know what? Let me double check that. Yeah. Nehemiah 13 verses 15 through 18. I know that it's the Sabbath, but if I keep working on Saturday, then that's a whole day of profit. You know what I'm saying? And so my desire to have more leads me into doing this thing that God told me not to do. But it starts in the heart, is the point. Just remember that key thing. It starts in the heart. I don't know about honoring your father and mother. Maybe you can think of one, but for me it's the same thing as God. Not honoring your father and mother is like the first commandment. It's rooted in my desire to be more than I am. To have a place that's not mine.
I kind of see almost like a wishing you had better parents sort of scenario, rather than like honoring the effort they put in, sort of like picking up.
Yeah. And then when you become a parent and you realize, oh, wait a minute, I'm the one with all those faults. Whoops. It's pretty humbling. Anything else on that one? What about murder? How could you attach murder to coveting? Or do you think it's right? Like, you can disagree with me on any of these if you'd like to do that. Yeah, Ryan?
I think in our conversation of restitution, there were like very specific plans and structures if you are going to take life. And it said specifically that you can't do it just out of grief for like, oh my goodness, you killed
Yeah.
You're wanting to equal the scales for yourself.
Yeah, I think that's right. And that points us to the Sermon on the Mount where Jesus talked about, you've heard it said don't murder, but he says, I'm telling you, don't even hate. And then that don't even hate, I mean, James 4 specifically talks about this concept of how it grows, the hatred in our heart. And so maybe you can put yourself to sleep at night by saying, I'm never actually going to murder someone. No, but the seeds that grow into that in other people's lives are in your heart, and that's not okay, is the point. We got it. That's it. I'm done with this. I think you get the point. But the point is, as we read through this command, you shall not covet. Don't covet your neighbor's house. Don't covet his wife. Don't covet his stuff. It says anything that he has. Don't covet. I think that it would be a really good idea for all of us in this room to do a deep, dark examination of our hearts and make sure that we get all of that stuff out. It has no place in the heart of a Christian. Anything you want to say about that? That's section number 2. I'll move into section number 3 here.
Maybe just a different way of thinking about that. If you use the word like value, like, I don't appreciate and value what I have enough. I want what that other person has. I don't appreciate and value what God has given me. I want some other God to go serve. If you use that, it kind of helps me to tie them all together.
Yeah. No, so that's perfect, because the next thing here is, and I think you did it. I've been talking about values throughout this quarter, and that's still true, what you just did. But I would think about it like this. I'm not sure if these are the right words. You'll have to be patient with me. But the words that I say is, what's the opposite of coveting? But now that I'm standing up here, I don't like that. I might not say what's the opposite of coveting. I might say, what's the solution? Like, what's the better path? And I think that, go ahead, you can check that out. Be content. Contentment is the opposite. Mark, were you going to say the same thing, or do you have another? Okay, let's look at this. Let's look at one for now. Philippians 4. Would somebody else do that? Philippians chapter 4 and verses 11 through 13. Before you read 11 through 13, can I just remind you that Philippians is one of the prison epistles, which means that Paul was sitting in jail when he wrote this. It's probably important to remember that. So 11 through 13, please.
Not that I speak from want, for I have learned to be content in whatever circumstances I am. I know how to get along with humble means, and I also know how to live in prosperity. In any and every circumstance I have learned the secret of being filled and going hungry, both of having abundance and suffering need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me.
Have you ever seen the, I think I saw it on a coffee mug one time. But I'm guessing that this saying is more popular than that. It's probably more than just a coffee mug. But I've seen a coffee mug that says, I can do all things through a verse taken out of context. Think about this. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. Think about the context of that and apply it rightly to yourself. Paul is saying, as he sits in jail, I have learned to be content in whatever circumstance I find myself. And he says, I can do all things through him who strengthens me applies to him saying, I've learned how to be brought low, and I've learned to have things. I've learned to suffer, and I've learned to do well. And in that context of, maybe I don't have everything in this life that I would like to have. But I can do all things through him who strengthens me. And you look at Christ and say, if Jesus can do it, then I can do it. That's a different use of that passage than most people. But contentment is the core. And I think contentment is going to be one. I've got two. But I'll let you say something about contentment here. I think contentment with the Lord and what He has given us is the first solution to don't covet in your heart. Don't covet. Don't desire other people's stuff because you're content with where you are and what the Lord has given you. Anything you want to say about contentment? Yep.
I think it becomes a big game of comparisons and where you take those thoughts. And then it's a very egocentric way of living. It's all about they have, I want, and taking, like Kevin said, taking yourself out of your position in life and putting yourself above everybody else,
Yeah.
even God. And it starts with the comparison. And social media, good or bad, it's there. It's what you do with it. But there's a huge, rabbit hole you can go down. You start following, my spot is, I love looking at construction. I love looking at, home improvement, all those things. And then you can go all different places, and if all of a sudden you're sitting in the middle of your room thinking, well, why don't I? Why can't I? Why, and it's the thief of joy in your life.
Yeah. I feel like you're articulating so much more clearly what I want to say, and it's the thing that I want to take from this class is this commandment. This commandment is just not another commandment. Don't do this thing. This commandment is what it is because it's the seed that grows into violating all of the others. Okay, so contentment. Oh, how about this? How about just to be safer? It's not the seed. It is at least a seed that grows into violating all of the others. Okay, so give me another one. What's another solution to this problem of coveting?
I don't know if it's disconnected from the first one, but the idea that God is going to provide all of your things, like the giving of the land. You don't need to take other things. It's like, I'm giving it all to you. Or the conversation about the sparrows and the lilies. You don't need to take or want other people's things because I know your needs more than you know your needs, and they will be provided.
I think that needs to be on my list. I think what you're doing is you're describing faith, and this is what Jesus said, and that could be a solution for coveting. I don't need to covet because I trust and know that God will, if He's clothed the lilies of the field and given the sparrows fruit, He's going to do it for me too. So good call on that one. I'll add faith to my list. Yeah, Jenny?
I was thinking that these sins start to flare up for me more whenever I realize, again, if you're out of the habit of disciplining yourself, where it becomes just natural to thirst for God's word and thirst to pray with God and talk to them, or seek wisdom like find treasure, which is what I'm trying to do each day to teach my kids. But I mean, even just when we go on vacation, I'm always frustrated on vacation or when I leave vacation because I didn't do a good job at it, because you're like somewhere else. But I feel like if you're not disciplining and centering yourself with that fuel that you get from God, then it's just it's mind-blowing the difference
Yeah.
on your focus.
Yeah. I wrote this one down too. What you made me think about, maybe it's connected to faith, but when Jesus was in the wilderness and the devil said, turn these stones into bread, and Jesus was like, I have everything that I need. Man shall not live by bread alone. That's kind of where your comment took my thought. Let me give you what's on my board right now, and I'll give you the last word, those of you who have raised your hands, but I want to make sure to get to this one. I think gratitude. Being thankful. A solid sense of thanksgiving to God for what He has done for me already is probably a really big move in the solution towards me desiring more and more and more. Rather than, give me more, give me more, give me more, my mindset is, thank you, God, for what I have. Two completely opposite, different mindsets. And you can look at both of those passages that I've listed for you up there on the board that will talk about that. But I saw Sandy and then I saw Melissa, so you guys can go.
I was to develop that love within us, then we're not gonna covet, my neighbor's house or the good things that they have, or I'm not gonna hate my enemy because, I'm developing that love, for everybody that I should have.
Yeah, yeah. Would this be a fair application of what you're saying? The idea is, instead of being jealous and coveting what he has, rather maybe celebrating with him for what he has. The love that drives me to be happy for you, rather than gritting my teeth saying, why do you have that and I don't? It's that kind of it's underneath the banner of love. Melissa, you had one? Okay, good. I like whenever our thoughts are tracking in the same direction. Okay, so my last word, and then I'll give you the last word. My last word, please can we take this lesson seriously? We got to get it out of our hearts. If it's in your heart, and this is where we start talking about, the hard work of Christianity and what Christianity is and dying to ourselves. It's really easy. It's really easy to talk about being baptized and dunked and come up and now you're a new person. It is hard to put that old dead man in the grave. So let's start the hard work of getting this stuff out of our hearts, if it's there. Yeah, Lisa?
But it's a lot easier if we remember that we're to examine ourselves daily. Not Joanne, not Scott, nor myself. If I do that, remember that he did say first, you love me and me only, no other gods, no other anything. I have to be first. Well, then you have to say, well, how do you do that? And he makes it nice because he says examine yourselves daily.
Yeah.
You can't stay dead, which I have resurrected Lisa many times, and it's not pretty, and it doesn't work, especially if I go more than a couple days without evaluating me. And
That's
when I
really
do
good.
that, how am I going to treat others?
The thing that I love about that comment is I think it would be really easy for me to justify my own coveting in my heart. Listen, I'm very happy with my house. I don't covet and crave a new, fancy, bigger house. And some people do. I just want a new smoker. Not really. I'm very happy with my smoker. But I think that I could do that to myself. I could be like, it's not that big of a deal. But you're saying, no, I don't compare myself to someone else. I examine my own heart and I weed that trash out. I like that a lot. Okay, I really like that smokers was a part of class today. That was extra nice. Okay, so thank you for your participation. If you would like to prepare for class next Sunday, start thinking about how has God made provision for the vulnerable and the weak? Because that's what our lesson is next week.